Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about the 824 mid-tier list. If you haven't checked it out yet, be sure to check out my support tier list and my AD carry tier list as well. You can find a link in the Google Doc, which is in the description. Also, in this Google Doc, you can find little mini Google Docs for each champion that I'm going to talk about. So if you click on each one of these, it's like a little guide for you. So I have a link to the wiki, which will tell you all about the champion's abilities and stats. I have a rating system 1 to 5. In a few different categories. So lane pressure is just how likely is the champion able to get priority in the wave and harass. Kill threat is how likely is the champion able to get kills in the lane. Safety is how safe is the champion from ganks in the lane. How well can they position in team fights later. Scaling, how well does the champion perform over time. And then reliability, just how consistent is the champion over a large number of games. Right, and that can entail a few different things. One, how difficult is the champion mechanically to play? Number 2, how many counter picks exist in the meta? Can you just blind pick this champ, or do you have to pick it more strategically? And then number 3 is how difficult are the decisions on this champion? How much macro do you have to understand? How well do you have to utilize the cooldowns? Also have recommended runes for you and recommended items. Just keep in mind that these might change depending on... I don't know why I have that Zyra guy down there. But these might change depending on the game circumstances, right? So a lot of the runes and the items will be pretty standard on many champs, but you might have to adjust. So if they have a Fed 80 assassin or something like that, you might have to get an hourglass if you're an AP champ a lot earlier than you normally might want to do that. So just a couple of extra information there for you if you're interested in that. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content on the channel as well. It does help other people find it. And let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so rocketing up to the top this patch is going to be Cassiopeia. And that's kind of rare. You don't see Cassiopeia a lot of times unless it's a tank-heavy meta. She does very heavy sustained damage to tanks, but historically she is kind of weak to assassins. So it's a little strange that we've seen her coming up so much lately, but there's a new build on her that I want to talk about, and some new technology that some people have come up with that have made her a lot stronger. As far as patch notes go, just before we go that much further, just really quickly, the only thing that changed was Dark Harvest, and many of the champions that took Dark Harvest are just going to take Electrocute now. There are a couple of Dark Harvest users that will still be around, like Karthus, but by and large, not a huge deal. It does weaken some of the assassins a little bit more. It weakens some of the poke laners a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to be a huge shakeup in the meta. Okay, so Cassiopeia, what's up with it? Why are people... why is she so good right now, even though I wouldn't say we're in a tank meta? Well, the big change is people have started maxing out Q rather than maxing out E. And the big reason that everyone started doing this is because E primarily scales based on your level, not based on your points in it. So as you can see, it does not matter how many points you have in this ability. As far as this base damage goes, it's strictly based on your level. So you do get some extra bonus damage. So when you poison somebody and you're hitting them with the Twin Fangs, then you do get some extra bonus damage based on how many points you get in this. But it's really not a very good bargain if you look at it, because you're paying 10 extra mana per point of this and you're only getting 20 extra damage. That is very, very anemic. When you look at most abilities like Noxious Blast, for example, you pay 5 extra mana, you get 50 extra damage. So that's really not a very good value proposition, and it makes you go out of mana really quickly if you level this up first, which is what people had done, and then you want to spam this. So that means that you have to buy things like Tear of the Goddess, you have to buy things like Rod of the Ages, and a lot of times that has forced her to be kind of this late-game hyper-scaling champ, but really it makes her really weak in the early game because she has to go double-scaling items. Right? That's another reason, because the meta is so fast right now that a lot of people hadn't really thought of Cassiopeia. And her healing is also based on level. But what if you only get 1 point in this? You keep it ultra efficient at only 40 mana a pop. It levels up over time with this. It levels up with your AP. It has a 0.7 AP ratio. So every 100, AP that you get, then you're going to be doing 70 extra damage. So really, to get this 20 extra value out of it, you're only going to need like, Sadie, chill. I don't know if you can hear that. She's just like, non-stop scratch on this cardboard. To get that extra 20 damage out of it with a 0.7 ratio, I don't know exactly what it'd be, like 28 or something. Yeah, it's something like that. So it's like 28 extra AP will give you 1 extra level in this pretty much over time. So basically, you know, if you just get like 100 to 120 AP, then you're doing about the same amount of damage as if you put 5 points in this. And instead, you can put points in your Noxious Blast. So this will allow you to harass a lot more with your Q early on. It gives you much better wave clear. And it increases your movement speed. Now, this is going to be clutch as well, because if you have all this extra movement speed, you don't have to take Phase Rush. Once again, Phase Rush doesn't do any damage, so you're losing a lot of potential damage if you go for like the traditional build where you get Phase Rush plus Tear of the Goddess, and then you have to get Catalyst and start stacking up your Rod of the Ages. You're going to be doing 0 damage from your items pretty much and your runes for the first 15 or 20 minutes of the game. And you're going to be so far behind, it's hard to catch up. So that has historically been a problem, but if you put all your points in Q first, and then you max this, I've even seen people maxing this last, and they'll get this second. It does a little bit more damage, it slows people, and it lowers the cooldown on it. But I think the big reason is people just want to keep this super cheap at 40 mana, so you can just spam it over and over again and still get really efficient damage out of it. So I'm not entirely sure which of these you should max second. Most people seem to be doing Miasma. Obviously, if you max this second, you would still have more mana efficiency because of this, and you would do a lot more damage with this. But I think people just do it for the efficiency, just so you can spam more Twin Fangs and get a really good value out of it. So yeah, that's basically the new technology. So if we look here, you want to go Comet instead. And another great thing about Comet is every time you hit somebody with a spell, it lowers the cooldown on Comet by a significant margin. I think it's 2 seconds per spell hit, and when you're sitting there spamming Twin Fangs on them, then your Comet's going to be up every 5 to 10 seconds. So it's very, very good. Yeah, you get a 20% cooldown, which is even more. I mean, at level 1, that's a 4-second off the cooldown. So yeah, it's awesome. And then your damage over time also lowers it by an additional 5%, which is an extra second or so in there. So you're going to have it up every 5 to 10 seconds. So in all-in trades, you can proc Comet, 2 or 3 times potentially. So it's a very, very powerful interaction with her. And then the rest of it's going to be kind of similar to what you would expect. Mana Flow Ban, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm. And then this is kind of the new hotness with a lot of mages we're going to see is Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. This is just to give you a lot of sustain in lane, just so that people can't poke you out as easily. And then you're going to want to go Ludens, scratch the Rylai's, go for Morello instead. There we go. And so because you don't have to get Tear and Rod of the Ages anymore, if you go for this new build, because it's so much more mana efficient, you can go for an offensive mana item like Ludens. You get an immediate power spike. You don't have to wait 10 minutes on Rod. You don't have to wait 20 minutes on Tear to stack. You get it immediately. And that allows you to bully out people a lot harder early on in the game because she has really high base damages. I mean, this doesn't look like much, right? It's like, okay, if you're going Twin Fangs, you're not leveling this up. It does have a 0.7 on it. But even if you get 100 AP early, it's only 80 damage plus, whatever, level 6. It's 152 damage. That looks really weak, right? It's like, oh, it's only 152. These other mages all have things that are somewhere between 200 to 250. This is 0.75 seconds. So even if you just cast this twice, then you're already talking about 300 damage early on, right? And so you can see really quickly why this is very strong. When you look at someone like Kassadin, where his Q is going to be on like an 8-second cooldown in the mid-game, she can cast lots and lots of these. She can cast like 12 of these by the time Kassadin gets to cast 1 Q. So she's not going to have as much upfront burst, but, once again, if the fight goes on for a few seconds there, if you can dodge one of their skill shots or just keep yourself alive for a little bit, she puts out just a tremendous amount of damage. So that makes her a huge threat, and now she's even more of a threat early on. And you're just going to go for the double pin as well, the Sork Boots Morello. Now, this is going to be almost ubiquitous on every single mage. People go Morellonomicon, and, everybody out there might wonder, well, why do they go Morellonomicon? Why not just rush Deathcap, or why not rush, Lichbane, or Protobell, or Rylai's? Rylai's is good on her. Why not rush that? Why not even rush Liandry's? I mean, Liandry's is extremely powerful once you complete it. But the reason is the cost. Sorcerer Boots are ridiculously underpriced, as is the Morellonomicon, particularly the Oblivion Orb. It's the Oblivion Orb is what you really want. You're kind of priced into getting Morello if you get Oblivion Orb because you have half the item complete. But it's really that spell penetration. And the reason is excuse me, if you've never really done the math or researched this before, magic resist, and the math gets a little weird here, and I might be off a bit, but I just want to go through this quickly. I don't want it to be a huge math session. But pretty much every point of magic resistance someone has gives them an extra 1% effective health. So think about this. If someone has 1,000 health with 100 magic resist, 100 magic resist is going to block 50% of the incoming damage. So that means you would have to do 2,000 magic damage in order to kill someone who has 1,000 HP. So they have 100 magic resist. You have to do 100% more damage, which is 2,000, in order to do that, 1,000 base health that they have. So what this means, effectively, and this isn't 100% correct, it depends on just how much magic, magic resist they have and all that. But a good way to think about that is every point of spell penetration erases one of these 1% increased effective health. So, if they have 100 magic resist, you knock off 18, you no longer have to do 100% additional damage to kill them. You only have to do 82% extra damage to kill them. So it's like you're doing 18% extra damage when you get the Sorcerer Boots and you get 18 spell pen. It's not exactly like that, but it's pretty damn close to what that is. So if we look at someone like Cassiopeia again here, we just look at her Q. Let's say you have it level 3. You get your sword. Well, you can't even get sword boots on her. Never mind. I totally forgot that you can't get boots on her. Okay, so you're going straight to Ludens. But you will eventually get Morellonomicon after that, because she, of course, can't buy boots. But you'll see that on other champions who get Sorc boots and Morellonomicon. But you can still get the Morellonomicon on her, which is 15 spell pen. So if we look at something like that, it's 15% extra damage. So even at like level 3, if you think about this, you're going to be doing about 202 damage. Just rounding up. And, the math, like I said, doesn't work out exactly like that. It's a little bit different than that. But this is like you're effectively getting an extra, let's just call it 27 damage. Okay, so you're getting 27 damage out of this spell because you're lowering their resistances, and that's just how it's working, right? So you're getting about, 27 extra damage versus on the AP side, even with a 0.8 AP ratio, which is really high, to get to 27 extra damage, you'd have to probably have something like, I don't know, 35. Yeah, close enough. So you have to have about 35 AP in order to get that same ratio. Well, 35 AP is going to be valued at 21.75 gold each. So that's going to be a 609. You're going to have to devote 609 gold worth of resources in order to get that same kind of effect, in order to get that extra 26 damage here. Right, so you need 609 gold. But spell penetration is only valued at about 31 each. So if we look at 560 here for 18 pen, spell pens only is 31 gold each. We'll round up. We'll call it 32 gold for a spell pen. So if you have 32 times 15, which is the spell pen we needed in that last equation, it's 480. So you're basically only paying 480 gold worth of resources in order to get that 27 damage. Versus if you were to do it the AP route, it would have required whatever that number was, 600 something, 630. So this is like way, way more efficient to get spell penetration rather than to get flat AP, even on champions that have really high AP ratios like Cassiopeia with a 0.8. A lot of mages are going to have 0.6 or 0.7 on a lot of their abilities. So, you would have to probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of like well north of 100% AP ratio before AP starts to get more valuable over time. And keep in mind that penetration also affects runes. So, it'll affect your Dark Harvest, it'll affect your Electrocute, it'll make those do an additional, effectively, 18% damage. It'll make any items that you have do an extra 18% damage, like the Liandry's Burn, like, God, Sadie, get out of there. What are you, Jesus. It'll affect Liandry's Burn, it'll affect, like, Luden's procs, anything that does magic damage in your whole kit gets affected by that. Whereas AP doesn't affect Liandry's. It does affect Luden's proc, but not as much as spell penetration would in most cases, right? Unless you just have a ton of AP. It doesn't affect, well, it does affect your runes. Like Dark Harvest and Electrocute do have some AP ratios, but it's going to be even more valuable than the AP is on them. So it's really, really strong. Okay, so that's the gist. So you'll see that a lot. You'll see Sork Boots. You'll see people rushing Morellonomicon. And that's just something that I don't think ever gets really explained or masked out very well. The reason people do that is Flat Pin is an under-budget stat. They will probably nerf it next year. They've talked about it some. And Sorcerer Boots are the best offensive boots in the game. Now, obviously, Cassiopeia is not going to get those, but when you start talking about some of these other mages like LeBlanc and whatever, the boots are actually a huge power spike. Versus if you're playing like an AD assassin, like a Zed or something, you know, getting your tier 2 boots, your Ninja Tabby or your Merc Treads or something, not nearly as strong. Not nearly as strong. So that does allow mages to get an additional boost of power when they get their tier 2 boots. Okay, so that's why Cassiopeia is going to be really strong. She's now turned into a very strong early game bully with this new build, who also scales to be a, you know, hyper threat in the late game. She takes Barons very quickly, takes Dragons quickly. She can shred tanks. In many cases, she can even blow up squishy champions very quickly. Unless you get on her and just erase her immediately, she's a huge problem. And she outranges a lot of these other champs. She has 850 harassment range with her Noxious Blast. Only 700 with Twin Fang, but hitting them with the Noxious Blast is you know, half the battle there. So very, very strong. This Miasma is also really powerful. It doesn't let people flash out, doesn't let people dash out. So it's pretty good against champions like Irelia. And if you level this up second, then it gets to be very, very slow, where it's tough for them to get out of it. And then, of course, she can protect herself from divers with Petrifying Gaze. Obviously, if she ever catches you with this and you don't look the other way, then you're pretty much dead. It's a 2-second stun. She's going to hit you with like 4 more Twin Fangs, or 3 more by the time you're able to do anything again, most likely, and you're probably going to be dead. So, really, really strong champion. She's very hard to play, and a big part of that is you have to attack moves. You have to orb walk with her, which is what they call it with AD carry. But the issue is you can't bind this. You can't actually just press attack move with her because you have to cast spells. So what that means is if you're walking like to the left, you know, you have to click your mouse over here to the left, and then you know, hover your mouse over somebody over here to the right to press Twin Fangs. Go back over here to the left, click again to move, go back over here, Twin Fangs. So you have to go back and forth across your character over and over again, and it requires you to have really precise mouse movements on the highest settings of your mouse in order to kite properly with Cassiopeia and cast your spells. In addition to that, being very heavy, like mouse mechanical, there's a lot of skill shots. You have to hit your Noxious Blast, you have to time this correctly so they don't dodge it. You have to get the range right on your Miasma because it has a minimum range. So you can't cast it directly on top of you. It has to go a certain range in front of you. So sometimes you have to kite people away before you can cast this on them. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And she's very squishy. So if you get hit, you're gone. And your move speed is not going to be as high early on as a lot of other characters because you can't get boots. And so it makes it harder to dodge skill shots with her as well, unless you're actively hitting people with your Noxious Blast so that you can get that move speed. So there's a lot of stuff going on with her. She's really, really hard to play correctly, but if you get it, she is very good. She does farm exceptionally well, too, because Twin Fang, if it kills a target, you get a mana refund. So she has a lot easier time farming early as a mage than most other mages, because she can use her mana effectively without actually using her mana to help her farm. So Cassio, super strong right now, very good against other ranged champions, very good at breaking tanks, a little bit weak to assassins, but there aren't as many assassins running around middle as there have been in past patches. Okay, Karthus, still going to be similar to what I talked about last time, so I'm not going to rehash all of that. The main gist, if you didn't see it, is that Dark Harvest is very good on him. It did get nerfed, so I dropped him down a little bit to tier 2, but he's still going to be very strong. But the big things that changed about him, rune-wise, are he can take Ultimate Hunter and Presence of Mind right now. So that lowers the cooldown on his ultimate a lot. You know, if you have level 11 with Ultimate Hunter and Presence of Mind fired up, you get a couple of kills. It takes your cooldown from If you have 20% CDR from Ludens, it's going to take your cooldown from 180 seconds at level 11 down to about 90 to 95 seconds. And that's only with 20% CDR. That's not including if you have blue, and that's only considering if you kill 2 people in a fight. If you kill more, it goes down a lot more. That's just, like, insane. Basically, in the end game, your ult's going to be up, like, every minute or so, which is obviously going to be extremely powerful. And then he scales really well with eyeball collection as well. He's able to stack that up. He's able to stack up Dark Harvest really well off of his ult. Now, keep in mind that Liandry's no longer can trigger Dark Harvest over again, which was really, really strong on him last patch. So you don't want to get Liandry's on him anymore. But yeah, just extremely good synergy with a lot of the runes out there. And he just farms like a monster too right now. You know, early game he can farm, then you can go start farming the jungle camps. A lot of the junglers right now are not power farm junglers. You're seeing a lot of things like, I guess Graves can power farm pretty well, but things like Kha'Zix, you know, Zen Zhao, Nidalee is becoming a bit more popular. Elise, a lot of these champions are going to be ganking a lot. And so you should be able to, you know, borrow some of your jungler's farm if you need to. But then if you start getting pressure in your lane, you can go farm the enemy raptors too. You know, if your mid laner goes to roam bottom, just let them know, push in your lane and go farm raptors or something. So that's a really nice thing about Karthus too, is like you can roam without roaming. So you can stay in your lane, farm. If they go rotate, you don't have to follow them. You can just go, you know, grab some raptors, grab some wolves, whatever you can get, go grab a scuttle, and then just press R. Boom, you roamed. So very, very strong. And then people are starting to move towards the same kind of model that I was talking about with Cassiopeia, where, you know, Karthus in the past has gotten tier and Rod of the Ages and like all this double stacking stuff. People figured out, well, what if I just skip all that and just go for immediate power? What if I just go for Ludens and then just rush double pen with Sork Boots and Morellonomicon and just start murdering people earlier? And that's worked out really, really well for Karthus. So you are a bit squishier, but you don't have to wait 10 minutes. You know, for your rod to stack. You don't have to wait 20 minutes for tier. So, really, really powerful build. He's great in most team comps. The beautiful thing is, even if you fall behind, you're still very useful later on. If you just get to 4 or 5 items, you know, you just press R, and it's going to do like 75% of everybody's health, and they just can't fight you anymore. Even if you get picked off, it just completely stops any sort of push, any sort of action out there. He's very, very difficult to deal with, even with people having Maw Malmortius, Locket, Redemption, you know, all of that stuff, Sterix. He can still put out a ton of damage. So, lots and lots of threat. He is vulnerable to assassins. Once again, not as many assassins running around. So, he does power farm really well, like Cassiopeia. He can farm safe from a pretty good distance with his Q. So, still going to be very strong, very reliable. I think he's a fantastic champ right now. Irelia, not much to say about her. They did nerf her on this patch. She's still ridiculously overpowered. Now, I realize that when we're looking at mid laners, she's probably got like a 46% win rate or something. Yeah, 46 flat. If you start looking at pros, though, she's still floating at about 52% and has just an astronomical pick rate, by far the most picked champion, at least on pro builds here. So, very popular. People know how to play around her to an extent, but she's still strong. I mean, she still just has an overloaded kit. She has insane mobility, great wave clear, excellent utility in a team fight with her disarm mechanic. She does true damage. She heals herself. She has just pretty much a massive damage mitigation that you can't knock her out of with the W still. So, it still reduces 40% of the damage coming to her. And she's only going to cast it once in most fights, so the fact that it goes from 16-second cooldown to 20 really doesn't matter. It does matter for the laning phase in that you have to wait an additional 4 seconds before you can go in for a trade for like really savvy top-end users, but most people are just going to hold that as kind of like an emergency button, I feel like. And so they have nerfed her a little bit. The 5 movement speed was a joke. This one's a bit more substantial. But I still think she's going to be just phenomenally powerful. I mean, once she gets that Trinity Force, she is so difficult to stop, and it just doesn't stop there. You know, even even though she's just like mega powerhouse at that point, you know, she keeps scaling. Like with Titanic Hydra, and then she gets Sterix. She's just a beast. Ton of damage, ton of mobility, ton of survivability. She's just way over the top. She's way too strong. I expect future nerfs. I mean, really the only thing that can stop her is herself. If you just misplay her, usually the way that I see Irelia lose in games that I play with her is she'll get really far ahead early, and then she'll just get really cocky and try to 1v5. She's just got like Yasuo syndrome. But that's really just people being dumb. That's not the champion itself. So if you're good on Irelia, or if you just want to practice her, she's very, very strong. I would say she's not the easiest champion to play in the world. She's not the hardest, but she's like a moderately difficult champion, probably like a 7 out of 10 or something. And so I don't know if it's worth investing the time right now, just because I think they're going to nerf her later. But if you're already proficient with her, or if you just want to try her out and have some fun and play something powerful, you can do it. But, you know, I would not drop hundreds of games on her thinking that you're going to be able to just steamroll people, you know, in Season 9, because I do think that they're going to be coming for her eventually. We'll see. I mean, maybe she stays overpowered for a long time, but the reason why I have her a little bit lower than Karthus and Cassiopeia is because I think these are a lot safer in the sense I don't think they're going to get nerfed as much. We'll see. And they play much better when they're behind, and they just farm so well, and they have so much utility. So I don't know, maybe Irelia deserves to be higher, but I think especially kind of a little bit lower in solo queue, Karthus and Cassiopeia are probably going to be a bit stronger. I think Cassio has some pretty good game against Irelia, actually, because you can stop her from engaging on you with the W, and if she tries to jump in your face, you can, you know, ult her and then potentially get away. So I think that could maybe be a skill matchup there. But anyways, those are going to be the top 3. Pyke, I didn't have Pyke up here originally. I had heard some grumblings about Pyke middle being really strong, but I played against it tonight on Viewers Night. We did actually manage to beat it, but man, is it very strong. It is really strong. It feels very overpowered, and a lot of it is because of his passive. And I've mentioned this before. I was like, there's no way they're going to put that number through, right? Well, they put it through. 800% of your bonus AD is how much you get healed for, right? So Pyke also stores this much of the damage he takes from enemy champions as gray health on his health bar, up to 80 plus 800%. With an upper cap of 60% of his max health. Okay, so you're going to be hitting 60% of his max health eventually. That can be restored over time. So what's up with Pyke? Why is Pyke mid lane a thing? Well, they buffed all of his AP ratios really hard, and then they nerfed the tanky aspect of him. So, and they added lethality scaling too, which is really awkward. Let me look here. League lethality. I think it's 18 apiece on Ghostblade and Dustblade. They may have nerfed it down to 15. Okay, let me just put Ghostblade on here. It is 18. Okay, so they buffed it from 15 to 18. I almost never play lethality champions, so I'm not sure. Oh, it's 21 on Dustblade. Okay. So if you get both of these, then that goes to 39 lethalities. That's almost 40, just for easy math. So if you look at this, that's 60 extra execution there, and then 80% of your total of your bonus AD. So if you get, you know, both of these items, what's that? 55, that's 110, and then off of runes and other random stuff, you'll probably get to like 130 by that point, and then 80% of 130 is 104 plus whatever other that number was, 60. You're getting 164 extra execute off of Pyke. So, you know, around level 11 or so, you're talking like a 600 damage, 600 damage execute. Pretty much, which is insane. I mean, it's 600 damage, a true damage that has a reset on it. Pretty much. So that's a ton of damage. I mean, that's almost 50% of a lot of squishy champions' health. Maybe not quite that much, but it's approaching it. It's like 40% of a squishy champ's health. So... Yeah, very, very strong champion because of this. And his other ratios got pretty good, too. I think they even added a ratio onto this at some point. It's 100% of your bonus AD. You get a ton of movement here. So you get 60 extra movement when you get Duskblade plus Ghostblade. So it's 100% movement. Decays over 5 seconds. Like, you are flying across the map. And then, of course, you have your hook, which is really, if you hook them, they're basically dead. But you can also use it as wave clear, which is pretty nice. But it's really this passive. You take a bad trade, you just press W, run out of there at Mach speed, and then zip right back in and go at them with your Phantom Undertow again. It's just an obscene amount of healing with one-shot potential with resets that gives your team a lot of extra gold in team fights. So I think he's pretty disgusting right now. Now, you can outplay this if you have something like an Hourglass or you flash his ult, but he can still kill you without the ult, too. I mean, he does pretty high, like, just normal auto-attack you and just hit you with the Shiv, you know, stun you, auto-attack you a couple more times. You know, he can still kill you, especially if you're squishy, even without his ultimate. So, and he roams, obviously. When you're going that fast, you can roam. So you can go bottom. Like, the game that I was playing, I think I was playing Karthus, and I was up like 50 or 60 CS. I was just power farming this game real hard, and then he just ended up getting a roam bot lane, got a couple of kills. He was fairly low. I started channeling my ult. You know, he pressed Ghost Water Dive, healed up for 50% of his health. Ult didn't kill him, and then he's rolling. You know, he started getting even more items and just zipping around the map, and I couldn't counter him with Karthus because he just kept healing every time he was low. He would just press W. And that made it very frustrating to deal with. So I think that his ability just to roam around and impact the map combined with his ability to one-shot people, and he has pretty decent wave clear if you use all of your abilities, right? So if you use, you know, Phantom Undertow plus Shiv, you can do a lot with that. Now, I will say that people are still going Aftershock on him. I think, like, you could go something like Electrocute if you really want to do a little bit of extra damage. But I think Aftershock is very nice. It gives you a lot of extra survivability. The Revitalize gives you a ton of extra healing. And Bone Plating will keep you safe as well, so you don't get vaporized whenever you go in immediately. And then Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace are great. Coup de Grace gives you that extra little bit of damage to get them under that percentage. And then Presence of Mind is going to let your ult be up more often so that you can... you know, go around and kill more people. So, yeah, I think he's very good. He's a great combination of, you know, damage, mobility, and survivability, right? Which are kind of the holy trinity of brokenness. If something is mobile, does a lot of damage, and is difficult to kill, it's tough. And so you might say, well, why is he not higher on the support tier list? In my support tier list, I think it's because he gets bullied really hard early. You're not going to have as many opportunities. You try to go in on a Zyra or a Nami, or maybe you can get Nami, but like Zyra, something like that. It's very difficult to try to assassinate 2 people early, and you fall really far behind in gold unless you start getting kills. So you're not going to be able to get your Ghostblade and your Duskblade because there's 2,900 gold, or you're going to fall behind the Nami who is just spending 2,100 gold on her core items, right, a lot of the time, on the Athenes, and then Ardent Sensors, like 2,300. So I think it's just a lot harder for him to get the items that he needs to get. Also, you can't roam as comfortably if you're in the bot lane, right? You can try to roam middle or something like that, but your AD carry might die if you do that. Versus in the mid lane, you can potentially roam. You can try to push him in and then go roam the side lanes. So that's where you can really leverage his move speed and his invisibility to exploit, you know, lanes where you can get kills, right? You can go top, you can go bottom, you can go invade with your jungler. There's so many different things you can leverage with that kind of mobility. So I think that mid lane really plays to his strengths a lot more than bottom lane does right now. But yeah, he's definitely a force. Super strong right now. Most tier lists will have him on there. They might have him a bit higher than I have him, but I think that's appropriate for now. He can still get bullied out in the lane. If he gets CC'd, he can still get blown up. So he does not farm like super well. He's okay, but he does not have very good wave clear like most assassins. So he's all right. Okay, Leblanc is another one that I think is super powerful. She did get nerfed on this patch. It's not the end of the world for her, but it certainly is something. So they ended up lowering the cooldown, I think, by 4 seconds early on her distortion. Now, this is what most people max first. So by the time you get to level 9, it's not going to matter at all. But before then, you have to be a little bit more cautious with your distortion because you can get punished when that goes on cooldown. Also, champions like, I think Cassiopeia is pretty good into her. You can harass her early. If she ever tries to jump on you, you can ult her. So I think that she's okay. She can still one-shot people later on, though. You know, once you get your Ludens and your Sorcerer Boots, you are off to the races. Excuse me, I think I might be coming down with a cold or something. But, yeah, same old LeBlanc, one-shot potential. She can still double cast her Distortion and engage on somebody from like 2,000 units away. So if you're really good on her, especially if you're able to take the tower and start roaming around and just bushing people, she's one of the best in the business. So I think that she's one of the safest assassins, and she has one of the highest single-target potentials against non-tanks. And there still aren't many tanks running around. So she can just have a field day with a lot of the other squishy champs running around right now. Okay, going down to Tier 2, these champs are still going to be really strong, but they're going to be a bit more situational, I think, than some of the others. Kassadin is fantastic against AP champs, particularly AP assassins. And people are still going the double stacking items on him. Like, something like Ludens is just not going to be as good. So that's partially why he's down here. He's just a lot slower to the draw. A lot of people are going, I think, Tyr and Rod. And then completing Archangels after that. Now, if you get those items complete and the game does go on for 15 minutes or so, then you do start to get really strong, particularly once you get to level 16, because that's when you get down to, like, the 1-second ult time. But, yeah, pretty good trading. You just kind of want to go with the same old sustain build. They did nerf this a couple of patches ago, but this is still the standard that most people are getting. Just Fleet Footwork, Triumph, and then Taste of Blood, Ravenous Hunter, just anything that can sustain you through the laning phase so you don't get poked out. You know, he has terrible wave clear early. His trading is not that great. He doesn't have a lot of great CC. He is pretty vulnerable pre-6 before he gets his ult. He can get ganked and murdered if the enemy team has some kind of CC. So very vulnerable champion. You do get some pretty nice payoffs, some pretty nice, you know, assassination potential, and he's surprisingly difficult to kill once he gets those items stacked up. He gets the Archangel and the Rod. And of course, he gets that shield off of his Q. So that's why I think LeBlanc's a little bit better, just because she comes online a lot faster. She can start snowballing harder in this meta where, you know, lane pressure matters so much because of tower plating and the importance of dragons and scuttle control and all that. But, you know, if you just kind of want to scale up and just play for the late game, then Kassadin can be a pretty good choice. Although, once again, Cassiopeia and Karthus are still going to give him a run for his money in terms of, like, hard scaling late game, and Irelia. So just be aware of that. There are lots of good late game options that have much, much better farm and much better early games than Kassadin. But he still is a force to be reckoned with if he has time to get online. Okay, Aatrox is another one who had been Tier 1. I don't think the nerf to the jungle camp matters as much. I just think that I feel like Cassiopeia is pretty good. She can actually kite him and blow him up early. I guess Irelia is kind of a skill matchup. But he's just fallen off a little bit win percentage-wise. Now, like the jungle, like the Smite Aatrox, who can go around and try to power farm, can still be pretty good. I just feel like you kind of lose lane priority to some of these other champions early on. But he's still a beast. I mean, if you need a tank on your team, you know, a tank, but you don't want to play an actual tank because they're bad, then Aatrox can kind of fill that role, right? He can get Ghost Blade later on and then just kind of run at the enemy team with his ult up, do a bunch of damage, flash on the back line, and then just, you know, cause them to blow a bunch of cooldowns. Then he's going to revive, and the rest of your team can catch up and clean everybody up. So I think that he is still really good. He has lots of potential. You know, he very well could be in the Tier 1. He is still getting picked a lot at really top-end gameplay. Not quite as much as Irelia, but pretty close. I mean, he's still 52% at the top end. Although, once again, if we start looking at kind of, you know, solo queue, lower end, this is Plat Plus. It probably gets even worse at lower brackets, but he's like 49%. So he's okay. So, you know, he very well could be a little bit higher, I think, but I just feel like these other champions are just a little bit better. They just have a little bit more utility about them, but he's still going to be strong. I think that like some of his matchups got a bit worse, particularly the Cassiopeia matchup, and I think Irelia is still a tough matchup for him, but I don't know 100%. He's probably pretty good in a Pyke. Okay, Ahri's another one that you're not really going to see in pro play, but she's a solo queue special. She almost always has a pretty high win rate. She's got 53% here. A lot of that, she's just very consistent, right? You have like 3 flashes effectively that do damage with your ult that are on a super short cooldown. So she can do high damage there. She has good wave clear with her Q. And she can just roam around and make plays. So she can get lane priorities where they're push and then go roam. It's on a fairly low cooldown. 130, I guess, is kind of like an average-ish cooldown. This charm buff was a really big deal earlier in the year. It's a 1.4 second, basically hard CC. It used to only be 1 second. And so, you know, you can just put 1 point in this, and now you can max Fairy Fire. And, you know, her combos do quite a bit of damage, right? She does true damage on the back of her Q. 280. And that's basically like 420, because true damage is not quite double damage, but it's close. That's like a good way to think of it. Also heals her. It's on a decent cooldown. So she's just kind of like your jack of all trades. You know, you need an assassin, she can do that. You need some wave clears, she can do that. You need some roaming and macro pressure, she can do that. Right? So she's not like a grand master at any one of those things, but she's just kind of like a pretty good blind pick. Things that like have hard CC and can stop mobility, most notably like Malzahar and Lissandra, are extremely good against her. But overall, I think she's pretty good into most champs. She can dodge a lot of skill shots. She's good. She'd be really good against Pyke. She can dodge his ult with her ult. Neeko is kind of the new kid on the block. Well, not kind of. She is the new kid on the block. So I'm not entirely sure what to think about her yet. You know, I've heard people saying she's overpowered, but people say that about everything. I haven't seen her a ton in the mid lane. I think mid and maybe jungle are her best roles. She does have pretty high damage on paper. You know, that can be up to 500 damage if they get CC'd. Right? Because it hits them once and then echoes twice. So like a 0.9 ratio with 500 base damage is really high. So if your team has a lot of CC and they're going to team fight, dropping this blooming bust is going to be awesome. Pretty good range on it too. And in theory, it can hit multiple targets as well if a bunch of people are really stacked up. Shape Splitter is really cool. Like you can, you know, make some tricks, do some cool stuff with that. It also allows you to roam and rotate pretty well. Tangle Barbs, if you can hit this, is great. This has really strong wave clear potential too, because it can hit every single champion in a wave, or every single minion in a wave rather, and has no diminishing returns. So a lot of heavy wave clear champs, you know, it'll say things like every champion hit beyond the first does reduce damage. So like Lulu says that, Taliyah says that. There are a lot of champions that say that so that they don't have like just insanely ridiculous wave clear. But she probably has really high wave clear later on, because you can do this, and then if you kill like one minion with blooming bust, if you get really good at that, getting one minion kind of lower with auto attacks, and then blooming bust and having it, you know, bust like 2 other times, you can actually get some really high wave clear with her. And if you root somebody, especially for that empowered duration, if you throw this through a minion wave and hit somebody, it's going to be a 3-second stun. They're definitely dead if you do that. So, and in a team fight where you can root multiple people and stun a bunch of people out, that can be really, really strong. So it is kind of on a longer cooldown early on. I imagine that you probably max your Q first, then you max your E. The mana cost does start getting a little high here, but I think you can get away with your standard Sork Boots, Ludens, Morellonomicon build. And then, obviously, her ultimate is going to be one of the most powerful aspects of her kit. 90-second cooldown is super short, has a really high radius, and if you land this on somebody, it just does a ton of damage. Right? So you get 650 damage, and she does shield herself a little bit to help protect her when she does that. So something like Zonya's is going to be really strong after you land that. So really good cleanups, like in a Mumu ult on steroids. So very strong, like good team fight, pretty good wave clear, decent pick potential with Tangle Barbs. She's okay. She doesn't have... I guess this is kind of an escape. This is pretty good. You know, it makes her invisible, and she gets a lot of movement speeds. That's a pretty legit escape. So she's got a legit escape. Pretty good catch, pretty good wave clear. She's very strong. I mean, a lot of people might have her up at tier 1. I just want to see her a bit more before I put her in tier 1. But I think that she certainly can be good. I think a lot of people will be learning her still and aren't going to be amazing on her until they practice her more. So she might very well, for the next patch, be tier 1. You know, once people learn her a bit more, once I see like how she does in these different matchups a bit more. She might be tier 1. Okay, we've had a, finally, into tier 2. We've had a Zoe revival lately. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure like what's up with that. I've just seen a lot more in my games, and she's getting a lot more play in pro games. I think part of that is because highly mobile assassins are sort of falling off in the mid lane, and some of these bruisers are falling off too. So you are still seeing Aatrox and Irelia, but you're seeing like less Akalis, seeing less like Zeds, Talons, Fizzes, things like that. You're still seeing these things, but not as much as you were. And I feel like she has pretty good matchups into things like Cassiopeia, into things like Lissandra, like a lot of these other mid lane or mid-range mages that can't outpoke her, where she can sit there and just spam Qs on them and spam, you know, bubbles to see if she hits people. I think potentially make her pretty strong. Now, a lot of people are maxing Sleepy Trouble Bubbles second. From what I've seen in pro builds, I have so many tabs open, I'm not even sure where pro builds is anymore. Oh, here we go. So a lot of people are maxing Sleepy Trouble Bubbles second. I don't remember if that's what they always did or if they used to max W second, but it's gone Q to E now. And then it's the same kind of build, right? It's Luden, Sork, Boots, Bro, and Omicron. Just a ton of penetration. Does a lot of damage. So yeah, I mean, she just fishes for hooks effectively, those bubbles. Has pretty good utility if certain items drop, if she gets a redemption or like an extra ignite or an exhaust or something like that. She can definitely win fights that way. And yeah, just pretty much one-shots a lot of squishies out there. As long as there aren't tanks running around to block her Qs, then she's extremely dangerous when she gets a couple of items, right? So if she hits somebody with a bubble, they're dead because no one's going to step in front and block that because they're going to die too. So I think that that's why we've seen the revival, is she's just very good against these other squishy mid-lane mages, people that don't have a ton of mobility to jump on top of her and kill her immediately, but at the same time are squishy enough for her to kill them. So I think she's become the best sort of semi-long-range threat out there. Okay, then we're getting down to tier 3. These can be really good. There are a lot of champs that can be played in the mid lane that can be really strong right now, but I still think that these are going to be sort of the best of the bunch. Tier 3 is pretty good stuff too. Lissandra is going to be strong. My thing about Lissandra and solo queue is that she doesn't do nearly as much damage. She doesn't have as much solo carry potential as some of these other picks. If you're in an organized team play, so if this was like for pros, or if this was, you know, maybe for flex queue or, you know, something like that, organized play, she'd probably be a lot further up there because she has a very unique role, whereas when she takes Aftershock, she can engage and start team fights, and she has, she's really good at that, and she can double up as an assassin to an extent, right? So she's very good if she gets a gank because she has a point-click stun, but she's also versatile and can serve as sort of that later in the game initiation. And if you start getting kills in team fights, then you get her new passive, the Frozen Thralls, and those are running around causing chaos, potentially doing a lot of damage. So she's just very, very disruptive in team fights, especially if she is able to find herself on the back line, because she can ult herself, and then she can Zhonya's, and then she's going to have Aftershock. So there are just a lot of different advantages to her in different team comps. She has pretty good wave clear. Her mana costs are still kind of on the high side. They were lowered recently, but a little bit more than most champs. And her ranges are really short, so it's only 725 on her Ice Shards. Her Ring of Frost is only 450. So very short range champion, and she can get bullied for that, particularly by something like a Cassiopeia. But even things like Karthus, who's really good at hitting his Qs, or Zoe, LeBlanc, Kassadin. A lot of these champs can bully her out early. So she does have a lot of team fight potential. She can be really strong. But I think in solo queue right now, you need just a bit more firepower from your mid laner. But she can work. And, excuse me, she can also be a flex pick, which is nice. So you can play her mid, you can play her top. That's another beautiful thing about Cassiopeia right now, and even Karthus, is like they're flex picks. So you can play them top, you can play them mid, you can even play them ADC bottom. I've seen Cassiopeia do very well in the bot lane, and Karthus potentially do very well in the bot lane. Because they serve the same kinds of roles as AD carries. They don't do AD damage, but they take dragons quickly, they take Baron quickly. They have nice wave clear, and they do very high sustained damage, so they can murder tanks later on as well, particularly Cassiopeia. And you don't have to siege anymore. Like the days of 5 people staring at 5 other people, you know, having a long, protracted siege for, you know, a base tower, that doesn't exist anymore. It's basically just go stand around Baron Pit and force them to come to you. Because if you get the Baron, you're going to take all their towers. So, you know, tower sieging really doesn't matter for the most part. Not nearly as much as it did. So you don't need the AD carry, like, long attack range and heavy damage to towers anymore. Because you can just win a team fight at Baron, get the Baron, and then just go win the game. So as long as you can team fight, kill tanks, take objectives quickly, scale really hard over time, then you serve the role of AD carry, even if you don't actually do AD damage. And sometimes it's even beneficial to have magic damage, something like Karthus or Cassiopeia. You know, if you have a Cassiopeia bottom, that makes, if your team wants to run something like Darius top lane, Zed mid lane, and Graves jungle, all of a sudden that becomes a lot more viable. If you're running something like Cassiopeia Zyra bot lane, you'll have plenty of AP damage to balance out the AD. And AD still is very popular in every role pretty much, except for support and mid lane. So that's another benefit. So she kind of serves that flex purpose, kind of like Cassiopeia and Karthus. So that, once again, that's a lot more powerful and organized play, but it can still throw people off during champion select as well. Or maybe you get a bad matchup, or maybe like someone on your team gets a really bad matchup. Maybe your top gets counterpicked, right, really hard, and you're like, no problem, man, I can go top with Cassiopeia. I can go top with Lissandra. Let's do this. You know, like maybe they were trying to play, I don't know, some melee champ, and the enemy picks Darius. Okay, you can go up there with, you know, one of your ranged AP champs. So I think that tactical flexibility is definitely worth considering. Malzahar is another pretty strong choice. I think Malzahar is almost always good in solo queue. He has really good wave clear, pretty decent scaling. He really likes the Leandre's buff from a while ago. Uses the double pin very well because of his pets. He can take towers really well. He can do dragons and barons pretty well with his pets. So he's got a lot going for him. His damage is a little bit more anemic than some of the other ones. It's really hard for him to kill people by himself a lot of the times unless he's super fed, and he doesn't roam that well. His mobility is pretty low. So that's why he's down there in tier 3. But, you know, he's really good on ganks or picking people off, you know, out of bushes or whatever. Pretty strong champ. Now, I think people have gone back to Ahri with him just for a little bit more harassment early on, and just so you can get Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch. People were running Dark Harvest before. I still think that something maybe like Electrocute or Predator, if you want to try to roam to side lanes, if you're against someone you can push in, like a Kassadin, and you can just push with your minions in your E and just like maybe take Predator and run to a side lane if they don't have a lot of mobility. So if they have something like a Leona Draven bot lane and they're not going to be able to easily get away if you come rolling up like, you know, full speed with Predator, I think that could be an option as well. I do like Ultimate Hunter also on him. So worth considering, but this is the standard build that it looks like most people are building kind of at the higher elo brackets, is Magical Footwear, Cosmic Insight, and those things. Still want to go. It's tough. Like, you can still go Morello on him, which is probably correct. I think, yeah, you just kind of have to go Morello. It's tough because Rylai's is very good on him, and you want Rylai's to be able to hold people still, but the spell penetration is so strong on Morello's, I think you just kind of have to take it. Taliyah's another one that's kind of had a revival lately, and I think it's because Assassins are sort of falling off, and she's pretty good against a lot of these other short-range or mid-range champs. She's still going to have pretty good wave clear. They did nerf it fairly recently, but she does have that one-shot potential later on, and she can roam really well with her walls. So Still going to be a strong champ. Probably other better mid lane mage choices, but overall, she's still got like a 52-53% win rate mid lane right now. So I think that's definitely worth mentioning that has been on an upward trend. And I think a lot of it is that, you know, I don't know for sure. I haven't played the matchups, but I think that against champions that can't really avoid her knock-up very well, so like Cassiopeia and Karthus, she can potentially get pretty good kills on them. Okay. Akali is someone that's fallen down quite a bit. I didn't think that nerf was going to mean that much, but I guess it did a little bit. And there are a lot of bad Akalis out there. I feel like Akali is just more annoying than she is powerful. Like, that Shroud is super annoying, but there are plenty of champs now that can deal with her. So like Cassiopeia deals very well with her. You can just spam your Q and you'll eventually hit her probably in her Shroud. Same thing with Karthus. So a lot of these like non-targeted abilities can kind of deal with her. You know, Ahri can throw her Q in there, probably hit her. You know, Neeko can drop Qs in there. So there are a lot of abilities. Zoe can throw a bubble in there. There are a lot of abilities right now that interact pretty well with her Cloud. So she's okay. If you get ahead, you can definitely still stomp with her. So if you're in Akali one trick or you practice her a lot, I still think that she can be good. But after kind of the most recent round of nerfs, I think there might be better choices out there. And then Fizz, finally, just a good, solid assassin. He doesn't quite have the same kind of eye-popping sustained damage as someone like a Kassadin, but he is very mobile, so he can get on champions like Cassiopeia and Karthus and kill them, because he just hops up on his trident, and then as he's falling down, he just flashes right on top of them, hits them with a fish, and they're dead, pretty much. So if he starts snowballing and gets ahead, he can be very good against these other control mages. I think he's going to get busted up by things like Irelia and Aatrox, probably. But other than that, against things, yeah, like Cassiopeia, Karthus, Zoe, not really Lissandra, because she can ult his fish to get out of it. But he has good matchups, and you can roam around and get kills later on. And he does have pretty high scaling on his ability, so I think Fizz is just a pretty decent all-around assassin. Then finally, honorable mentions. Zed can be really good, but there are a lot of hourglasses floating around out there right now. But if you're really good on Zed, like, you can make him work. I've seen some pretty good Zed plays, but there's just a lot of potential outplays out there, and like enchanters like Nami and Sona are getting to be a lot stronger. And if he doesn't kill them in one rotation, then he kind of is worthless. He doesn't have any CC. So, you know, if they can heal or shield through your ult, or you just don't have enough power to kill somebody with it because you're behind, then he falls off pretty hard. So he's an okay assassin. He's good at picking people off, but he's very, very singularly focused. Galio's another one that kind of deserves a little bit of attention. I have seen some good Galios. They did buff. I think it was a buff on him this patch with the AP. We'll just have to see how it goes. I haven't seen him really taken off in terms of win rates or anything like that. He has come up a little bit. So I think he used to be like 48% or something. So he's definitely moving on up. Very good anti-assassin pick. So if they have a Kassadin or a Leblanc or, you know, something like that, he can be very strong. Cassiopeia is going to destroy him. Probably Karthus is probably going to be pretty good against him. So, you know, if they are running assassins, particularly AP assassins, then I think he can be good. And I think a lot of people are probably still building him full AP from what I've seen. They do Aftershock plus just a heavy AP build. So, yeah, we are seeing him creep back up a little bit more. Even though they nerfed his AP, I think, with this most recent change, from what I'm remembering, I don't remember all the exact changes in the patch notes, but I remember watching Freak's patch notes, and he was saying that, like, Tank Galio got buffed, but AP Galio got nerfed. Not entirely sure if that's true. I think he still gets Rod of the Ages, so he still requires some stacking. But just single stack, he doesn't have to do tier, so if you get this early, you know, you can definitely make it work for you. But yeah, it looks like usually a defensive boot, Rod, and then Hourglass. Some people get Ludens on him. But we'll see. So I think he can be good. It's just standard kind of Aftershock runes. And and then just a bunch of AP for the like utility AP stuff, like Hourglass and things like that. So still can be okay. Rise can still be a monster if you're really good on him, but he does require stacking. I think he almost always gets tier. He might get tier and rod, and I feel like that's just a little bit too slow in this meta right now, but if you get going, you can be good. Victor just kind of fell all the way off. I think Victor's time in the sun is pretty much done. People might still be building him, but that nerf to the Q was pretty brutal. And I don't think he was that amazing in mid lane either. He was mostly picked as a top laner to bully out melee champs, so to bully out things like Aatrox, to bully out things like Irelia. Now, if you run into Aatrox, Irelia, Urgot, something like that middle, he can work. And that's mostly where he's picked. And people are still building kind of the hybrid build with the Iceborne Gauntlet and then Leandri's on him, even though they did nerf that Q build. So no one's going back to using E on him. Everyone's still Q spamming. So he's a decent utility mage if you want someone who's kind of semi-tanky that can kite around a lot of melee champs. He doesn't have very reliable CC, though. His damage is on the low side compared to some of these other mages later on in the game. I still think he's going to get busted up if he's against a ranged mage that's competent, because Iceborne Gauntlet's not going to do anything in that matchup. And his other itemization choices aren't fantastic. So, you know, if you put him against a Cassiopeia, Karthus, Zoe, LeBlanc, something like that, I feel like he's going to have a real bad time. As you can see, most people are picking him specifically as a counter pick to sort of these melee type of champs. And then Katarina, if you're really good on Kat, you can make her work. The Dark Harvest nerf does hurt her because she was someone who could abuse that big time with the resets. But, you know, she's okay. She doesn't have great farming. She doesn't have any CC. She doesn't have amazing utility. But if you do get ahead, if you do start to get those kills, and especially if they don't have a lot of CC, then you can potentially, you know, 1v9 take over the game. So people are still doing the Dark Harvest thing on her. I assume they're still going Presence of Mind. Oh, they're going Coup de Grace and Triumph. Okay, yeah, so when you get your resets, you'll start healing up. So, still an option. I just think there are better options. If you want to play an Assassin, I would just play LeBlanc if she's available. Maybe Kassadin, something like that. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe to help other people find the content. Come check out the stream sometime if you like. Starts around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a lot of fun. I did just get back to Diamond, so that should be pretty cool. We'll get some higher quality games here. If I can, you know, cross my fingers, climb up a little bit more, we might be able to run into some other YouTube content creators out there, and that would always be fun. But anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day, and I'll see everybody next time.